Have you ever stopped to wonder if you're quietly sabotaging your own potential? Or worse, if the people closest to you are slowly dragging you down and you don't even realize it? This isn't about intelligence. It's about something deeper, something quieter, something that Stoic philosophers over 2,000 years ago warned us about: the mindset of a foolish person. According to Stoicism, foolishness is not a lack of education. It's a pattern of behavior, a way of thinking that quietly destroys your potential, damages your relationships, and blinds you to the truth. In this video, we'll walk through 6 subtle but powerful signs of a foolish person, not to judge, but to awaken, because awareness is the first step to wisdom. If you're new to our channel, we invite you to subscribe and turn on the bell. This is a place where growing older means growing deeper. Let's begin. Sign 1. They refuse to listen or learn. A foolish person is like a locked door with rusted hinges. They appear open, smiling, nodding, pretending to engage. But the truth is, their mind is closed. They might repeat what you said. They might even appear polite, but nothing has landed. Nothing has moved. Because deep inside, they've already decided, I know enough. I figured it out. What could anyone else possibly teach me? That's the quiet arrogance of ignorance. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that hides beneath the illusion of certainty. They guard their ignorance like treasure, not because it nourishes them, but because admitting they don't know something feels too threatening, too vulnerable, too exposed. But here's the paradox. What is pride that cannot withstand learning? What is self-worth that crumbles when challenged? It's not strength, it's fear in disguise. True wisdom is the opposite. It leans in, it listens. It doesn't cling to being right. It clings to what's right. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, commander of armies, ruler of an empire, once wrote quietly to himself, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change, for the truth is my only concern." Now pause, think about that. A man with absolute power, begging truth to correct him. That is not weakness, that is greatness. And yet, how many people today, without an empire to rule, without armies to lead, will scoff at a friend's advice or shut down when faced with feedback? How many people respond with, "That doesn't apply to me," before even considering the wisdom being offered? The truth is, a wise person seeks correction because they want to grow. They don't fear being wrong, they fear staying wrong. But the fool, they resist correction because they see it as an attack, because they mistake change for defeat, because they believe their current understanding is the final version of truth. But when your mind is closed, no light can enter, and without light, nothing grows. Imagine a garden that refuses sunlight because it's used to the shade. That's what a foolish mind becomes. Overgrown with weeds, stuck in the same small plot of soil, refusing the nourishment of new ideas. Learning requires humility, and humility begins with the courage to say, I might be wrong, and that's okay. Because every new insight, every shift in perspective isn't a loss of identity, it's a step toward becoming more of who you're meant to be. So ask yourself, are you really listening, or are you waiting for your turn to speak? Are you open to change, or are you simply collecting facts to protect what you already believe? Because the wise never stop learning, and the moment you think you've got it all figured out is the moment you stop growing. A foolish person walks through life like an exposed nerve, raw, tender, always on edge. Every glance becomes a judgment. Every word is a potential wound. They carry their ego like a fragile vase, so delicate that even the softest vibration feels like an earthquake. And so they expect the world to walk on eggshells around them, to cushion every truth, to filter every joke. to keep every mirror from reflecting too clearly. Have you ever met someone like this? You offer gentle feedback, out of care, out of honesty, and suddenly they snap. Not because your words were cruel, but because their inner world is already filled with unspoken pain. You make a lighthearted joke, and the room turns cold. You share something honest, and they twist it into an accusation. To them, everything is personal. Because their sense of self is so fragile, they see threat in every shadow. Seneca, one of the wisest Stoics, once said, "A man's greatness lies in his ability to endure insults without resentment. But the fool doesn't endure. They erupt. They lash out, not to defend truth, but to defend a wounded pride. They don't pause to reflect. Don't sit with the discomfort. Don't ask the deeper question, why does this affect me so deeply? Instead, they react, fast, sharp, hot, with words that often hurt more than the original offense. They believe that if they feel offended, someone else must be to blame. But what they don't realize is that most offenses are mirrors, not weapons. They reflect something inside us that hasn't yet healed, an insecurity, a fear, a wound that's been ignored for too long. And in that reflection, there is an opportunity not to strike, but to grow. Because here's the truth. Most people are not trying to hurt you. They're just living from their own perspective. And even when someone is being unkind, the wise person knows you don't have to pick up what someone else throws. Wisdom asks, is this worth my peace? The wise learn to listen without absorbing. They let words pass through the filter of self-awareness. They separate the useful from the harmful and keep their heart calm. But the foolish person, they collect every slight like broken glass, carrying it in their pockets until it cuts them open from the inside. And what's the cost? Relationships crumble, trust is lost, bridges burn that never needed to, all because their emotions sit in the driver's seat and wisdom is left standing on the side of the road. So ask yourself, honestly, are you quick to take offense? Or are you strong enough to stay with the discomfort, to breathe through it, to ask, is this pain coming from the outside or from something within me? Because true power isn't found in shouting the loudest. It's found in staying silent when silence protects your peace. If this resonates with you, take a breath, let it settle, and subscribe, not just to this channel, but to the quiet strength that comes from knowing you don't have to react to everything, to be everything. Sign 3, they chase pleasure above all else. A foolish person lives in pursuit of the next high, not necessarily drugs or extremes, but anything that promises instant gratification. It could be food, a late-night shopping spree, endless scrolling, toxic relationships, attention at any cost. They are slaves to impulse. And in a world that markets pleasure as the ultimate reward, it's easy to mistake indulgence for freedom. But the Stoics knew better. They taught that the constant chase of pleasure, especially the shallow kind, isn't a sign of a full life. It's a sign of emptiness. Seneca once wrote, "The fool's life is empty of gratitude, full of fears, and lies wholly toward the future." Because pleasure, when sought without wisdom, always lives in the future. The next bite, the next thrill, the next escape. But the moment it arrives, it vanishes and you're left chasing again. And again. The foolish person thinks happiness lives in what's next. The wise person knows it lives in what is now, and in how aligned your actions are with your values. Pleasure isn't the enemy, but when it rules your life, it becomes one. You may have seen this before. Someone who jumps from one obsession to another, always busy, always stimulated, but never satisfied. They confuse noise with joy. They confuse stimulation with peace. And in the end, their life feels like a blur of distractions, never anchored, never fulfilled. True joy comes from presence, from gratitude, from the quiet knowledge that you don't need more, because you are already grounded in enough. The Stoics didn't seek to avoid pleasure entirely, but they practiced something more powerful: self-discipline. They knew that saying no to an impulse was often the same as saying yes to their inner peace. So ask yourself honestly, do you seek comfort more than character? Do you crave pleasure more than purpose? Because the more you chase what is fleeting, the more it runs from you. And the more you turn inward and steady yourself, the more joy will find you, without the chase. Sign 4. They blame others for their problems. When life gets hard, as it inevitably does, the foolish person doesn't look inward. They look for someone to blame. It's always the government's fault, or their boss, or their parents, or their partner, or their past, or fate itself. Anything and everything, except the one place that actually holds power: themselves. But blaming others may feel satisfying in the moment, like scratching an itch. It gives a rush of righteousness, but it leaves no room for growth. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said it best: "It's not what happens to you that disturbs you, it's your judgment of it." We cannot control the wind, but we can set the sail. Wise people understand this. They know that while they may not have chosen their pain, they can choose how they carry it. They take responsibility, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to move forward. But the foolish person, they cling to the idea that the world owes them, that circumstances are fixed, that someone else must change first before they can feel better. And so they live in a kind of emotional paralysis, waiting, blaming, resenting. What they don't realize is this: every time you blame someone else, you give away your power. You hand it over saying, "Oh, I am not in charge of my own life." But there is no freedom in victimhood, only bitterness, only helplessness. And over time, this mindset becomes a prison, one with no walls, just beliefs. And the key? It's been in their pocket the whole time. To take responsibility is not to blame yourself. It's to reclaim your agency, to say, "This happened. I didn't choose it, but I will choose how I respond." That is the Stoic way. That is the path of wisdom, and it begins not with a finger pointed outward, but with a hand placed gently on your own heart. Sign 5. They talk more than they think. Words, so many words, poured out endlessly, like water from a broken faucet. That's the language of the fool. Constant sound, little meaning. They talk to fill space. They talk to feel important. They talk not because they have something to say, but because they're afraid of what silence might reveal. They interrupt. They dominate the room. They jump in not to understand, but to respond, to prove, to perform, to be heard at all costs. But there's a deep truth that the Stoics understood. The more you speak without thought, the more you reveal what you don't know. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor and philosopher, wrote, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue, because a stumble can be forgiven, but careless words can wound. Once spoken, they cannot be taken back." In Stoicism, silence is not emptiness. It's presence. It's clarity. It's the space where understanding can grow. The wise person knows this. They listen before they speak. They pause. They consider, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? They understand that every word is a choice, and every choice shapes the world around them. But the fool mistakes volume for wisdom. They believe the louder they speak, the more they matter. But true influence rarely comes from shouting. It comes from speaking with intention. The wise speak not to impress, but to express something real, something useful, something lasting. And often their silence says more than 1,000 careless sentences ever could. So the next time you feel the urge to fill a silence, ask yourself, am I speaking from awareness or from fear? Because sometimes the wisest thing you can do is say nothing at all. Sign 6. They fear change. Among all the signs of foolishness, this may be the most quietly destructive one, because it hides itself well in routine, in nostalgia, in the comforting phrase, "But this is how I've always done it." Foolish people cling to the familiar like a child clutches a worn-out blanket, even when that blanket is soaked with pain. They would rather stay in a place that hurts than walk into a future they don't fully understand. Change to them feels like a threat, a crack in the illusion of control, a whisper that says, you might fail, you might fall, you might lose yourself. But here's what the Stoics knew. Life is motion. Nothing stays the same, not your body, not your mind, not even the world you live in. And resisting that motion doesn't stop it. It only stops you. Epictetus taught that while we can't choose the cards we're dealt, we can choose how we play them. That's the wisdom that separates the fool from the wise. The foolish person says, I'm too old to change. I've always done it this way. Why bother? But the wise person asks, is there a better way? Is this still serving me? What might I become if I allow myself to grow? It's not that the wise never feel fear, it's that they feel it and still take the next step. Because deep down they know staying the same out of fear is not safety, it's stagnation. And stagnation is just a slower kind of dying. To grow is to stretch is to feel discomfort. But discomfort is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It's the doorway between who you were and who you could become. So if you find yourself clinging to old ways, old habits, old identities, ask yourself gently, is this truly who I am, or just who I've been afraid to stop being? Because what looks like fear on the surface is often just wisdom waiting for permission to rise. Let's take a moment to reflect. Foolishness isn't about your education. It's about how you treat your mind. Do you protect your pride or protect your growth? Let's recap the 6 signs. They refuse to learn. They are easily offended. They chase pleasure over purpose. They blame others. They talk more than they think. And they fear change. If you recognize these signs in others or in yourself, don't turn away in shame. Turn toward truth. Because the path to wisdom, as the Stoics believed, begins with self-awareness. As Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If this video gave you something to think about, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs it. And before you go, take one more moment to subscribe, not for our sake, but for yours. Because wisdom begins with a single step, and that step might just be here. Until next time, stay still, stay strong, stay stoic.